Bonjour, hello everyone, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Shayla Manswabi-Hubner. I'm Ottawa Wik-Wam-Kong First Nation, which is located in Ontario, Canada. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently based out in New Mexico, where I work as a research associate at Johns Hopkins Center for Indigenous Health. I, along with my colleague, Dr. Emily Harros, we will be co-facilitating this webinar today. On behalf of Johns Hopkins Center for Indigenous Health and the NIDA-funded P50 Center of Excellence, CIRCLE, which is focused on community-driven solutions to advance equity and substance use outcomes, we would like to welcome you to this event, Digital Storytelling with Jill Fish. This is one of the several webinars hosted by the CIRCLE Center of Excellence. CIRCLE stands for Community-Driven Indigenous Research, Cultural Strengths, and Leadership to Advance Equity and Substance Use Outcomes. Our goal is to collaborate with Indigenous communities to address substance use related health issues through research, training, and outreach. As a national resource, the CIRCLE Center focuses on recovery, prevention, cultural strengths, family wellness, and policy solutions guided by Indigenous voices. We're excited to have you all here and look forward to the enriching conversation ahead. At this time, we'd like to invite you all to share what land you're calling in from in the chat. I can share what land I'm calling in from. I respectfully acknowledge that the Albuquerque office occupies Pueblos, Tigua, Pyro, Dene, Nuchu, and Nede lands. These Indigenous communities have longstanding connections to this land, and their histories and cultures continue to be significant within and around the present-day settler state of New Mexico. I'm grateful to live, work, and gather on this land and remain committed to actively supporting these communities. So this will be a webinar, which means that attendees are automatically placed on mute and cameras are off. We encourage you to participate by adding any questions into the Q&A box or the chat. We will have approximately 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for Q&A, so we will save all questions for the end of our call. Now I'm gonna have Dr. Emily Harros introduce our speaker for today.
Thanks, Shayla, and thanks so much for everyone for joining. It is a great honor, really, to have Dr. Jillian Fish here with us. Dr. Fish is one of our research core members on our CIRCLE P50 Center of Excellence, where we're trying to promote Indigenous methodologies and incorporating those into the work we're doing at CIRCLE and beyond. So I'm really grateful that she agreed to kick us off with our first webinar. So Dr. Fish is a member of the Tuscarora Nation. She is an assistant professor of psychology at Macalester and a counseling psychologist with her own private practice, Fish Psychotherapy and Consulting, which is great. Her scholarship focuses on transforming systems and institutions to be more socially just and equitable for Native American and Indigenous peoples. She developed the Indigenous Ecological Systems Model, which is the framework the P50 Center of Excellence leverages for almost all of the work we're doing. And is also the basis for her award-winning digital storytelling project, Originatives. Dr. Fish's teaching experience and interests include courses in Indigenous health, cultural psychology, and qualitative methods. So thank you so much, Jill, for sharing your work, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you both for the lovely introduction and Chwant Eskanahat to everyone here today. I hope your spirits are well. I'm coming from Dakota homelands and the present day homelands of many Anishinaabe and Ojibwe people and a lot of urban Indigenous peoples in the United States here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor that CIRCLE uses the Indigenous Ecological Systems Model, and I love being a part of it. So I'm just really happy to be here and to present about Originatives. I'll talk a little bit about the Indigenous model today. So I will get going here. So I know my slides look a little glitchy on my thing. Can anyone confirm or deny?
It has settled down for us.
Okay, I'm gonna try to touch it as little as possible because it gets a little funny sometimes, but just let me know if it gets continues to go a little haywire. this is a digital storytelling webinar. I call it Justice for Native People, Justice for Native Me, which was something a participant shared in their digital story from Originatives. But this talk is really about using methodologies that empower Native people. And the methodology I typically use is digital storytelling and storytelling in general. So for today, I will talk a little bit about stories and storytelling, and the importance of narratives in reclaiming and owning our power, our bodies, and our lives. I will talk a little bit about the Indigenous ecological systems model, since I developed that in my early years of graduate school. Emily.
I'm just so sorry. The slides are really going a little wonky. They're
Mm-hmm.
kind of flashing in and off for us. Oh, there we go. That's better.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. No, just let me know if they do it. They do it again. I can go off slides too, and
Okay.
we'll just have an informal chat. So I'm fine with
If you
either.
want to send them to me too or anything like that, I'd be happy to go through them but keep going.
Okay, okay. We will carry on and see what happens. I will talk a little bit about the Indigenous ecological systems model, since that is the foundation for originatives. And then I will talk again about originatives and as a digital storytelling project. Can I just check in with my slides? Was that okay?
No, I think it's now flashing again.
Okay, let me send them to
Yep. Small break.
let me just go off PowerPoint a little bit right now, just to talk about storytelling and the role that it plays in my work. So for me, stories are just really important to understanding the self and where we come from, where we are, and where we're going. So when it came to do my own work in graduate school, I really wanted to do research that focused on stories and narratives, and provided Indigenous peoples the place, space, and time and the tools to integrate their thoughts about ourselves into their understanding of who they are. Because I find oftentimes we don't have the opportunity to do that in the various settings that we're in. So I kind of have an overarching research question that guides all of my work, which is just what would it be like if, instead of marginalizing the stories, the cultures, the histories that are so central to our sense of selves, what if, instead of marginalizing them, we brought them to the center of everything that we did? And that is really what anchors me and guides me in the work that I do. So does anyone have my slides? Because I can talk about the model. No.
Not yet. Yeah. Oh, no. So please go ahead and talk and we'll let you know, but they haven't come
Okay,
through.
okay. Okay. So I developed the Indigenous ecological systems model back in my early years of graduate school. And eventually I think it was published in like 2017 or 2018, and I continue to work with the model since. But the Indigenous ecological systems model is a adaptation of Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model, which, if anyone is for everyone who's a psychologist, knows that Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems model is the dominant model of understanding human development in terms of ecologies, environments, and context. So when it came to my own work with Native peoples and Indigenous communities, I really was originally drawn to Bronfenbrenner's original model because it does highlight these different environments that are important to our development and that shape us over space, place, and time. But as I started working with the model, even though it had all the pieces there, it still felt like it didn't fit with my conceptualization or understanding of or my own experiences of what it means to be Native. So what I decided to do then was just kind of invert the model and adapt it. So what I did was so hard to explain without this image. So it was, the Bronfenbrenner's original ecological systems model. It is the way I think of it is kind of like an onion. It's three-dimensional, and there's these different layers to it, and the developing individual is at the center of the model. It goes out from there to include different environments that are close to the individual that have an effect on them, like, your parents, your friends, school, people you interact with every day, and places that you go every day. And then, Shayla, you suggest I try sharing again. I don't know how this will work.
I also share the image of the models if you want.
Okay, let me just,
Yeah.
I can see it. Let me just skip to this. How's it look?
Good, and it actually might be better out of presenter view, so.
Okay, then you're gonna see all my notes. That's fine. Maybe. Okay. Okay. So this is Bronfenbrenner's original model, and this isn't like, I could talk about Bronfenbrenner's model and the Indigenous Ecological Systems model in its own talk, which I know we'll be doing in a couple months. So I won't spend a lot of time on the model itself. But as you can see, Bronfenbrenner's original model has all of these different components and pieces to it that affect an individual and their experiences in life. And they have kind of like these terms that I think personally, if you're not a psychologist, are challenging, or have a higher level of education, I think are challenging to understand. So I've worked with the model over the years, and at first, it looked something like this, where I just essentially inverted it. I'm just gonna go in presenter mode because it still doesn't look. I'm so sorry, everybody, that is getting this version of my talk. Let me just. Okay. My hope is once that's through. Okay. So this is what the Indigenous Ecological Systems model looks like. What I essentially did was invert the model so that individuals are no longer the core of the model. So in my work, that means Native people, right? If we're using Native people at the center of a research model, then to me, that promotes a deficit perspective where all of our research questions are being nested within the individual rather than the environments that are congruent or incongruent or a mixture of the two with our ways of being and knowing in the world, and can affect then how we feel and navigate the world and our various health outcomes. So I inverted the model so that it starts with history, which is called the chrono system. And then from there, it includes culture, which is called the macro system. And then the individual starts. So what that means is that, and I believe this is a self-evident truth, that Indigenous peoples and also all people have a history and culture that shape our experiences in the present day. This includes histories and cultures of survivance, of thriving, of overcoming. It also includes histories and cultures of oppression and colonialism. And I use this model to understand these different contexts and how they shape Native people. And so my work originally started heavily quantitative, and now it's more qualitative and in the realm of kind of like alternative methodologies like digital storytelling, but also Indigenous methodologies. So yeah, that's a little bit about the model, and it felt like a crash course, but I will proceed with caution from here. I have renamed the different environments in the model because I find myself giving this presentation to people who have never heard of Bronfenbrenner, and I don't think we have to use Bronfenbrenner's terms. And so the way I think of it is, there's history, there's culture, there's Native people, but then there's environments that are the most immediate to us that affect us. There's those surrounding environments, which are not super immediate to us, but are things that still affect our development through their interrelationships with each other. So it kind of goes out from there. Those distant environments are like healthcare systems, their policies, their practices, a broader society that trickle down to have an impact on who we are and our experiences. And right now, this is the most recent figure I used for a paper that I published on digital storytelling for what these environments look like and examples of them for Indigenous peoples. So I don't want to spend too much time on that because I want to talk about digital storytelling and originatives. I feel like I can see the flashing on someone's face, some of your faces. So now that we did the model, let me just revert back to this mode for all of you to see. So this is work from my dissertation that I started in 2019. I did a large digital storytelling project, and I still work with people and consult with people around digital storytelling, work for Indigenous peoples. And the project is called Originatives. The idea is that we're working with people around digital storytelling and using digital storytelling as a tool to help Native peoples create original stories about our lives, histories, and cultures to share with their families, friends, and maybe the broader public. So the purpose of digital storytelling is really multifaceted and really dynamic. At its core, I think digital storytelling is useful for individuals just to have the opportunity and space to story things and to say things that are otherwise left unsaid, and give people an opportunity to create a cohesive narrative about themselves at this particular place and space and time that will then go on to evolve and inform their future. At a broader level, I think if individuals have the opportunity to share their digital story with others, then it can create a broader narrative shift around what people think about Native people and who we are. And so, kind of affecting that public narrative and that consciousness about us, that public consciousness. So some of you might be here because you know what digital storytelling is, but some of you might also be like, what is digital storytelling? And there's a lot of different, definitions and ways to do it. This is the way that I did it. There are so many different ways that people do digital storytelling. So some people work with individuals and help them create a short video about their life. Some people do it in a workshop format and it's a little intensive. So maybe a 3 to 5 day workshop or shorter than that. I've seen people do it in K through 12 settings as a part of after school programming. I recently worked with a school in Winnipeg where they're using it as a part of their curriculum daily in class. So there's different ways to do it. This is the way that I did it for Originatives. So when I was a student too, I worked on the Immigrant Stories project at the University of Minnesota. And that's a really large scale digital storytelling project for people who migrated to the United States to tell their migration story and journey. I worked on that project, and that's when I was first exposed to digital storytelling in the workshop format. This idea that you could create community and bring people together to create digital stories about themselves and their families and their identities and their cultures. And I thought that was really an amazing way to do a research project. So I was really inspired by the Immigrant Stories project and received funding from the University of Minnesota to kind of adapt it for use with Native peoples. So ultimately, since I would be working with organizations and Indigenous peoples in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth, these urban areas, I wanted to adapt the workshop so that it would be shorter. We did a 1-day digital storytelling workshop, which is actually really intense. And I think if you can find a way around it, I really recommend a longer process. We did a 1-day digital storytelling workshop because we were working with Native organizations and they were letting us come in and host these workshops at no cost to allow community members to come in and participate in originatives. So I didn't want to use the space and take up space from these orgs that were doing really important work. I also thought it would be potentially taxing for individuals to attend a multi-day workshop where oh, okay. Thank you. Thanks. I thought it'd be really taxing for individuals to attend a multi-day workshop, where they might not have childcare, they might not have transportation, they might have, to request time off of work. So we're trying to do this in a way where it would be accessible to people, and they could come as they are for 1 day to do, a digital story. What this meant is that I had to work with community members beforehand to help prepare them for this 1-day experience so that they could get the most out of it to create their digital story. So this would mean helping community members write their story beforehand. So they would already have a draft when they showed up to the digital storytelling workshop. This also meant prepping people, like as you're writing your story, can you think of what images you would want to represent your story? And I'll talk about the imagery and the videos and the different aspects of the digital media that we use for digital storytelling in a moment. But there was significant work that people had to do before the workshop. I've seen other people who have a longer workshop have community members write their digital story in the workshop itself. Instead, for originatives, people showed up with a strong draft of their digital story. To do that, I would provide community members with story prompts that they could choose from, and they could write a story about a journey. So this would ask them several questions about, where have they been? What has their life been like? How did they go from point A to B to C and back again, and what have you? They could write a story about family. Individuals could write a story about their identity and place in society. And then people could write a story about a cultural object. Most people chose to write a story about their identity and place in society. But all of these categories overlap. So many of them talk about things culturally that are important to them, like drumming, singing, beadwork. People talk about their family a lot. And people talk about their life journey up until this point in time. So depending on what story prompt they picked, there might be a particular focus or emphasis, but they certainly overlap. In originatives, we also use traditional medicines and talking circles. Since this was a new space for people to attend and be in community, we wanted originatives to be its own community for people for that day. So we had to really facilitate and foster that sort of environment. So people came in, we would smudge beforehand. We would have sweetgrass available if people felt like they needed some grounding during the digital storytelling process, which could be really emotional for folks who are talking about really difficult topics or saying things that they've never said before for the first time that they've only thought about. So the beginning of the day always started with smudging, and then also with a talking circle where we would all introduce ourselves, get to know each other, set our intentions for the day, and just start to make connections and deepen our relationships. We would also end with a talking circle as an opportunity for people to wrap up and to share about how this process was with them. And then we would go into sharing our digital stories with each other. So ultimately, we hosted 22 workshops through partnerships with 11 Native serving organizations in the area, which I'm really grateful for. Our home base was the Minneapolis American Indian Center, so most of our workshops came out of there. But other times, there were obviously 10 other places that we would go to host workshops. We can advance the slides. Thank you. I use a lot of transitions, so sorry. We can just blow through all of these so they're all up there. Thank you. So there's different steps to doing a digital story. Again, at its core, it's really flexible and there's different ways to do it. In our process, this involved the person first writing a 300 to 500 word story. This would typically map onto a 3 to 5 minute story. So usually 100 words maps onto 1 minute of a video. We did not want to constrain people. This was a recommendation, but some people ended up with like maybe a 15-minute digital story. That was not uncommon for people to have long digital stories. And again, our process was not to constrain people and tell them that they had to make a particular story. People could share as much as they wanted or as little as they wanted. But we would have them write about a 300 to 500 word story. They would come into the workshop with their draft finished. They would share their draft with other workshoppers, with me. I had really lovely workshop assistants who came to the workshop. So usually there were 2 workshop assistants who came who would help people through these different steps. But once someone had a really solid draft of their story and felt like this was the story that they wanted to tell, then we would work on recording an audio voiceover of it. So individuals could record in a quiet space that we found in these community centers, which sometimes can be a challenge. You know, if we were going to a new place, one of the first things we had to do was figure out, you know, like where is an acceptable recording space that would allow for a quality recording for the story. This was a really intimate process because again, a person's not just going in and recording a story on their own. It was usually with me or the workshop assistants. And so one thing we encouraged was that people practice reading their story out loud, because when we write, it's very different than saying those words out loud. And sometimes people would become emotional in sharing some things that were very difficult experiences that they've had. So is important to practice, but also sometimes just sharing a story in the presence of another person sometimes is challenging in and of itself, to let someone in on something so important in your life. So sometimes we would record stories multiple times until a person felt comfortable with their story, but more often than not, there were just different tricks we used for editing a person's single voiceover. So if someone didn't like how they said a certain sentence, we would just stop and then they would say it again, and then we would go in and edit out the part that they didn't like later on. So recording and finishing their draft was always in the morning usually. Then we would all have lunch together. So that was another time to deepen our relationships and make connections with each other. But the afternoon was usually dedicated to gathering images or music and video that people wanted to have in their digital story. So sometimes these images would be things that they have on like their Facebook or their social media pages, things that they have on their phone. We had quite a few elders who participated in Originative, so it was also not uncommon for people to bring their photo albums into a digital storytelling workshop. And I would scan their photos in for them so they could, I would digitize them so people can create a video out of them. And once people had all their images, their music, and any sort of clips that they wanted to use, they would combine them into software. And again, there's a lot of different software that people can use for video making. We used WeVideo because we had access to it through the Immigrant Stories Project. So all of us, me and my workshop assistants, were there to help coach people through using WeVideo, because in terms of things like self-determination and giving people back the power to reclaim their stories and lives, through this digital storytelling process, we really wanted people to feel like they left with not just a story, but with new tools and skills for how to tell a story in this important way. So oftentimes we sat with people and help them figure out how to use, help teach them how to use WeVideo. So this could be a generative process for sharing people's stories in this way. So, for example, there were many people who came to the digital storytelling workshop who wanted to just learn how to create a digital story so they could go back and use it with their students or at their own community organizations and centers. And I thought that was really powerful and impactful. Again, at the end of the workshop, once people created their video and finalized it, they had the option of sharing their video in the workshop itself, but also by sharing their permission with me to sharing permission with me to tell me to let me, sorry, there's a ding on my end and I'm like really distracted right now because of my flashy slides. People could share permission with me to let me share their story on a future website, which I hope to have time to show you today. One thing that I didn't mention that I usually mention at the beginning is that I said that we wanted people to come as they are. We wanted everyone to come despite their skill level and their access to resources. So that meant providing everyone with everything that they would need besides their story and their pictures to create a digital story. So people didn't need a laptop. They didn't need any sort of digital software. We provided everyone with a Chromebook. We provided a projector, a scanner. We provided recorders, computer mice, headphones, almost anything that you could think of, phone chargers, USB cables, USB-C cables, basically everything that anyone could need to make a digital story. Participants received prepaid debit cards and credit cards for participating, $50. They also received lunch and a USB with their story on it and access to their WeVideo account. Can we advance the slides, please? So eventually we had 75 digital stories from Native America, and can we advance again? And then 68 of those consented to share their stories with the public, which was really lovely. And I think if I can share my screen now so I can go to the Originatives website, that would be lovely. Thank you. Okay. So that is, there we are. Okay, so Originatives. So this is the site that hosts the digital stories. It used to have its own website, but I merged it with my own. Once I put all the stories up here, this is the result of our digital storytelling project and Originatives. These are the folks who consented to share their stories with the broader public. So you can go and view the stories here. What I love about this archive or this collection is that I find very rarely that you can go and see a gallery of smiling and happy and thriving Native peoples, even though that is certainly how we certainly have joyful experiences. I feel like they're not showcased often in this way, though they're increasingly becoming more common to show our lives and all our complexities and our stories. So I think I would definitely encourage people to go and view these stories and hear about people's lives from their own perspectives. There were just so many different powerful things that I could talk about from the workshops that I really enjoyed. There was once this whole family in Duluth that came in to create a digital story at the workshop, and that became a more common experience. So someone, you know, a family member did the workshop in Minneapolis and told the family about it, the rest of the family about it in Duluth. So then we would have a mom, her daughters, the aunt and an auntie come in who was from Alaska, who like happened to be in town, who wanted to create a digital story. People would bring in their photo albums. This family brought in, I think, like a bushel of apples to share with people. They brought in old dissertations that they wanted to take pictures of. People would bring in dolls that they wanted photos taken pictures of. People would come in and share. An elder shared that he had never thought about himself this way before, and that when he was writing his story, he would stop and he would pause, he would look at pictures, he would cry, he would write some more, he would go back and look at pictures and cry again, because this process gave him an opportunity to talk about himself and understand himself in a way that he had not previously had the chance to. So yeah, definitely go check out the stories. I think this is one of the best experiences I have ever had. Having the chance to get to know people in this way, many of whom actually still stay in touch with me. Some of them still call me, some people text me, some will email me. It is a really powerful experience for everyone involved, including myself. So if you go on anyone's page, you will see their you will see their name, you will see a little quote from their story, you will see their video, you will see like who the storyteller is, their tribal nation or community, when the video was created, where it was created, and you'll also see their transcript. So I'll share a little bit about Mo's digital story here.
I grew up wondering where I belonged. I knew pain, emotional, physical, spiritual, sexual. I aspired to wholeness. I tried alcohol, drugs, sex to escape my feelings, yet they never sufficed. I tried meth one day and it changed my life. I knew I didn't want to travel that road of the people I used with. I did not want to become a bitter person. I wanted to get out of my life as it was. I knew I wanted to be myself. I decided to be sober, prayed for guidance, and was led to recovery with my stay at Kateri residence. I followed the program, which included 20 hours of self-care a week, AA, therapy, cultural teachings and events, and a thriving GLBT community. I found home and a place to love myself. A genderqueer two-spirit boy family, Nehio Esquel. I continue to strive to be a better Mo each day. My life.
So I will wrap that up there because I want to save time for questions. I really apologize for my slides being that way. It had thrown me a little. So if anyone is here seeing me speak for the first time, I can attest that I am not typically like that. But thank you. Yeah, this digital storytelling, I'm happy to talk about it, answer any questions. Yeah.
Jill, thank you so much and for weathering the storm of the slide issue. So you were amazing, and thank you from all of us. You have some Q&A that I'll read out. The first one is kind of brought in some Q&A, but also has been a comment, which is this idea, and thank you to our commenter on research is medicine. And Lisa Martin also asks, the work reminds me of projects I've seen that use photo voice to tell stories. It helps us collect information for the project, but also ended up being healing and action for the participants. So just talking a little bit more about that idea.
Completely. Yes. I do think research can be medicine. And I think in this case, it was for many folks, though it wasn't a focal point of the project. You know, like I wasn't, when I was first thinking about originatives, I wasn't setting out to do like an intervention or you know, to change people. I wanted to give people an opportunity to tell their story and for it to have a ripple effect on how people think of us, and then create more, you know, healthier environments for us to interact with once people have an experience of knowing us in a more meaningful and deeper way. But then it came about after very quickly, the comment I made about the elder who came in who said he cried and, you know, was writing and went back again and cried some more, and how he felt changed in a positive way. That was the first workshop. And so there we would debrief afterwards, me and my workshop assistants. And so we kind of had this moment where we're like, oh, like this is healing, you know, like, and we all know that storytelling is medicine and storytelling is healing. I don't know if we thought of digital storytelling that way, because there was this component of like, we're sitting around these Chromebooks creating the story, right? But those, you know, then when you go through the first workshop experience and know that you're sitting with people, talking about very difficult experiences and traumatic experiences that people or family members have had, and historical injustices and trauma. And then so when you have that first experience, you're like, okay, like actually this can be healing. There's a lot of potential here. So then we always carried ourselves differently after that, knowing that we are a space for someone to heal and make sense of their life. And after that, then things were really different, and we decided to ask people 6 months after doing the workshop, you know, like how are you, and like what has changed. And this is in the slides that if I could burn these slides after this, I would, because there's something weird with them. But we would ask people 6 months later how they felt after the workshop. And many people reflected on they felt like they were better. The words were, I am better for having done this. My family is better for having done this. I need to share this more. It brought me and my family members closer when I shared it with them. So the story itself, like, created, even though it was a digital, we know stories as we talk and connect with each other, orally create connection and a space for healing. But it seemed like the digital story, like watching it and viewing it and talking about it, also created a different space for healing. Which I just thought, even though it wasn't the original point of the project, has almost become the best part of it afterwards.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I imagine, yeah, just sort of all that you'd have to do to sort of, as you're realizing this, to think about like, how do we support this? And so one of the other questions in the Q&A was a little bit more about like preparing people before they came. And so the question was specific, like, did you meet once or twice before the actual workshop? Do you give them a handout to help guide them? But also I could imagine, sort of just based on your last comment, you know, thoughts of like preparing them mentally for this space or for this type of work.
Yes. We gave people it wasn't a handout, but it was a questionnaire with the story prompts to help them for their story. So that's one thing. But this wasn't like onboarding for your typical research project. People had to talk to me on the phone at least once to be able to come to the workshop. So I had to know them. So when I was, you know, putting out flyers for the project, I put my real phone number on there. And so that's how people still text me and still call me. But that was just part of the project, is that for how intense of a day it is in terms of learning new skills and executing them, but then also emotionally, they just had to have contact with me on the phone, and we had to have an actual, you know, conversation to connect. So our relationship in many ways started with that phone call. Some people I would actually meet in person, So some people would just, because we're at these community centers, more often than not, we were at the Minneapolis American Indian Center, where people would just come in off the street and walk up to the workshop and be like, hey, are you the person doing this, and can I talk to you? Which is why it was so important for the workshop assistants to be there and to know how to do everything, because I would get pulled by people who would be like, hey, like, what are you doing, and who are you, and okay, like, I want to do this, but I'm not sure. And so there was a handful of people, most people I talked to at least once on the phone, corresponded a lot through email to continue preparing them until the day. But there are a handful of people who like wanted to come in and like, like see me and talk to me in real life, which I was all about. There was another person who texted me for several months. I think maybe like, gosh, it wasn't quite 6 months, but this person texted me for a very long time, until they felt comfortable, coming into the workshop and felt like they knew me. So it's like you just like can't do this project and not be fully committed to it and not be fully committed to these relationships, because people really wanted to know that I was a safe person that they could trust their story with. I took that very, very seriously. One person did not come in for a long time, even though she expressed interest months ago and would call and be like, hey, I'm still interested. Like, how are you? And would just talk to me and get to know me. When this person finally came in, we would also have them respond to survey measures in the workshop, or before the workshop. And she did not respond to the survey measures before the workshop. And so I was like, like, we'll see what happens when she comes. And she came and she was like, I don't like these questions about historical trauma. Do I have to respond to them? And it's felt like such a critical moment because, in our relationship, because we had two reimbursement methods for compensation. One was that you would get compensated for responding to the survey measures and writing your story before the workshop. That's how I would know that people were prepared for the day, that they wrote their story and they responded to the measures, which were not necessary, but they did it. They did that part. So then I could reimburse them. But then for this person, she did not do it beforehand. And so I was like, oh, like, I feel like like this is how we said we were going to do it. But in that moment, I was just like, you know what, like, don't respond to the survey. Like, I don't care about the quantitative measures are important, but what's most important to me is your story and that you feel comfortable. And so I was like, don't do it. And she's like, okay. And she didn't do it. And we were great after that. And we were fine before that, but she was able to trust me after that, to know that I care about community members as people versus as participants.
Great. I think we have somebody who's going to ask a question live now.
Hello, this is Angelita. Thank you, women, circle of women. Thank you for your presentation. And I'm the person who wrote in the chat that perhaps Trickster was joining us. It's my experience on Zoom calls that sometimes a trickster from one of our traditions shows up. And as a grandmother, I want to say that I've learned to listen when Trickster shows up and say, oh, what are you trying to say, Trickster? What's up? What am I missing? So it kind of fits in with the fact that I apparently was raising my hand and didn't realize it. So Trickster was raising my hand. So I'm moved to talk about something if you were bringing up for me, and that's the relationship between what's happened to us with Zoom because of the pandemic, how so many things have moved on to Zoom, and we've all adapted our ways for our survival, plain and simple. And now it seems that the Academy is is integrating Zoom procedures into oral tradition. I am what's called an Indigenous scientist and midwifery consultant. And I have worked for 50 years collaborating with Western science and holding the space of a traditional wisdom keeper. So that's where I'm coming from. That's my body of knowledge. My Australian friends say I took a walkabout through graduate school, never really finding what I was looking for, but having a lot of good conversations with academics over the years. And I think that we're on the edge, and your presentation today, Ms. Fish, has brought me right to the edge of what happens in healing, because that's the last thing you talked about. Healing for us as a people, as peoples from our countries here. When we don't have the ability to tell our stories the way they come. And you know, when you talked about the old men who cried, where on Zoom have you ever seen an old person or a young woman, Indigenous people, I'm talking now, crying? I just saw it for the very first time on a Zoom last week, and everybody was totally freaked out. They didn't know what to do. But you see, I think when old people cry or when young women, I was a missing teenager. I was discovered by a White Mountain Apache woman, 3 women, and I thank the women on this Zoom who are from the White Mountain Apaches. Thank you to you and your community for saving me and putting me together and sending me back to my homeland. So I was no longer missing. What happens when we express our sadness gets eliminated by a process like what you're describing right now. And not just your process, not just the process and the model that you're describing, but I'm a grandmother raising a big red flag for us, all of us who collaborate with Western science and technology and Western ways of doing things. We're on the edge of losing something really, really deep. And that's a question that's not like I have an answer, but I'm a grandmother making an observation. And I would really very much like for that to just be considered an observation that you may hold later when you observe something that brings you to that place of decision making. I'm offering you these words from my heart and mind and from my years of experience. And I thank you very much for everything you're doing. I am no way trying to be critical. I'm looking to the next generations as we do. And I thank you because I prayed for all of you. Please let there be young Indigenous women who can carry things forward for us. And that's what you're doing. And I thank you all very much. And that's all I have to say. Leo's in Chiokwe Utesia. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that comment and way to wrap up. And I just want to, I don't know, Jill, if you want to say anything with that in mind or, yeah.
I appreciate that. No, thank you. I do think so much is lost in Zoom and in like a digital and technological landscape. I think there were people who said they didn't want to participate in the project because storytelling was a winter tradition in their community, or they didn't want to digitize their story. And I was okay with that because I knew that there would be many people who felt that way. And simultaneously, I hold that knowing that there were many people who came into the project from, 18 to elderhood who really loved it and was able to have that emotional experience. And I think we could only have that experience because it was in person and it was a small community that we created to be able to do something like this. And I think that's all I have right now.
That's really wonderful. Thanks so much. And I think we're over time. We're just at time, so we'll wrap it up now. I would just want to say again, Dr. Fish, how grateful we are for you to come and share all this with us. It's really wonderful, and the conversation has been, I think, really valuable for many of us. There are a lot of unanswered questions in the Q&A. So what we're going to try to do is try and get answers to those and send those out to attendees if we can, so that everybody can have that as well. And just thank you all for making time and space for this. And yeah, thank you. We will see you. We will have another one of these about every quarter. So we'll be sending out webinar advertisements as well. So hoping you can make it to the next one. So thanks so much, everyone.